This artifact was sealed underground for 2,600 years. Wait, that is a different story. Let's look at a different timeline. In 1941, an engineer named Dr. Hans von Ohain built a jet engine that the German military immediately ordered him to destroy. If you are not subscribed yet, do it now. This kind of content disappears fast. His blueprints did not vanish. They moved into private corporate vaults where they sat completely untouched for exactly 82 years. What comes next is harder to dismiss. The history of flight contains a massive gap. Standard education teaches that Frank Whittle and Hans von Ohain invented the jet engine independently during the late 1930s. This narrative is clean. It fits perfectly into high school textbooks. The physical evidence reveals a messy reality. In 2023, independent investigators gained access to proprietary files of the Reich Air Ministry, the government department that controlled German aviation from 1933 to 1945. These files contain 14 distinct engine designs that use axial-flow compressors. An axial-flow compressor uses fans to push air straight through an engine parallel to the drive shaft. Modern commercial aircraft use this exact layout today. Textbooks claim engineers only mastered this layout in the late 1950s. The files show detailed blueprints dated May 14, 1941. This is not fringe history. This is 85 years of unbroken documented record. Consider the source of these documents. The papers sat in the Allied Intelligence Objectives Subcommittee archives. This was a British and American group formed in 1944 to seize German technical secrets. They stamped these specific files top secret. Then they moved them to a military storage facility in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. The public never saw them. State institutions filtered them out of the post-war narrative to protect corporate interests. Dr. Antony Kay, an aviation historian who spent 25 years studying early gas turbine development, concluded that these 14 designs were fully functional. They were not concepts. They were manufacturing plans. Peenemünde, June 1941. A 32-year-old engineer named Max Bentiel stands inside a concrete tesselle. Dust hangs in the air. The room smells of synthetic kerosene and burnt oil. Bentiel grips a steel lever connected to a fuel valve. Before him sits a prototype engine called the He's 30. It uses an axial compressor with a single-stage turbine. The machine is small. It measures exactly 2.7 meters in length. Bentiel turns a valve. High-pressure air from an external starter tank spins a rotor. The engine catches fire inside its combustion chamber. A low roar fills the concrete bunker. Bentiel watches a mechanical gauge on the wall. The needle climbs steady. It stops at 10,000 revolutions per minute. The engine produces 860 pounds of thrust. This matches the performance of the best British engine of that month. Bentiel runs the engine for 12 hours straight. The metal glows a dull cherry red. Most turbine blades of this era break after 30 minutes of continuous load. Bentiel steps closer to check the exhaust gas temperature. It reads 610 degrees Celsius. The turbine stays intact. This test is a major success. Bentiel records the final numbers in a leather ledger. He expects an order for mass production. Instead, a courier arrives at the gate 3 hours later. The courier carries a signed document from the Air Ministry. The order is clear. Bentiel must dismantle the He's 30 prototype immediately. He must scrap the tooling. The ministry orders the entire team to stop working on axial designs. They must transfer to a factory that builds standard piston engines for bomber planes. Bentiel packs his notes into a wooden crate. He hides 34 engineering drafts under a false bottom in the box. He walks out of the facility into the rain. The project is officially dead. This moment was completely documented in Bentiel's personal journals, which were later verified by archivists at the Smithsonian Institution. The papers show that the technology worked perfectly. The closure was not a failure of physics. It was a calculated move by administrators who feared the future. The engineering world moved away from this design for 15 years. Bentiel's hidden drafts contain the exact blueprint for modern commercial flight. The industry chose to start over from scratch rather than use his calculations. This is where it gets uncomfortable. The mechanics of flight are cold. Steel, fuel, and air do not feel weight. but the people who build them do. Max Benteel spent his old age in a small house in Indiana. He watched commercial jets fly over his roof every day. Those planes used the exact internal cooling patterns he drew by hand in 1941. Nobody knew his name. The world praised corporate laboratory for inventions that he had buried in a wooden box to save them from destruction. He lived to see his life's work become the foundation of global transit, while he remained completely anonymous. You have felt this. Most people have felt this at least once. You work on something with total dedication. You pour your energy into a project, a job, or a relationship. Then someone else takes the credit, or the timing goes wrong, and your effort disappears. You are left watching the results from a distance while someone else holds the prize. The gap between what you build and what the world sees is often vast. The early jet engineers were not fighting physics. They were fighting human systems. They were trapped inside an institutional machine that valued control over progress. Community CTA, most people have felt the gap between the truth they know and the story the world chooses to tell. If this is landing for you, you are not alone. And you are not wrong to question the narratives you were handed. Drop a comment. Tell me where you are with this. Let us look at Benteel's final journal entry from December 1945. He wrote about the silence of his workshop. The tools were gone. The metal prototypes were melted down into scrap iron. He realized that the physical engine did not matter. The ideas were already moving across the ocean in the briefcases of military officers. He knew his blueprints would fly, even if his name never left the ground. He accepted the quiet erasure because he knew the math was true. The way of a fact does not depend on a title page. A discovery remains real even if it sits in a locked basement for a century. The truth of that 1941 test run survived the destruction of the lab, the collapse of the state, and 80 years of institutional silence. It lands here now, completely unchanged by time. Hold that, because it connects to something not covered yet. Institutions do not bury technology because they are evil. They bury technology to protect their own stability. The removal of the 14 axial jet engine designs followed a clear institutional logic. The first reason was strategic exclusion. In 1941, the German military operated under a doctrine called a blitzkrieg, a high-speed warfare system that required immediate results. Piston engines worked well enough for short flights over Europe. Axial jet engines required completely new factory tooling, specialized pilot training, and rare heat-resistant metals. The Air Ministry calculated that switching to jet production would drop total aircraft output by 40% for a full year. To the bureaucratic mind, a perfect engine next year is worse than 10 average engines today. They chose short-term output over long-term technological dominance. The second reason was politically untenable competition. The development of early flight was carved up between established aerospace monopolies like Messerschmitt and Heinkel. These corporations had invested millions of marks into centrifugal flow engine production. A centrifugal engine uses a heavy, paddle-like wheel to fling air outward into a bulky casing. It is reliable but structurally limited in top speed. Benteel's axial engine proved that the corporate monopolies were building obsolete hardware. If the ministry accepted Benteel's designs, the major manufacturers would lose their state contracts to smaller, independent engineering firms. The corporate executives used their political influence to lobby the ministry. They argued that axial development was an expensive distraction, ensuring that the superior blueprints remained locked in office cabinets. The third reason was post-war asset protection. When British and American forces captured the German research centers in May 1945, they initiated Project Lusty, a military operation designed to harvest enemy aviation secrets. They discovered that the axial blueprints were decades ahead of Western commercial research. If the Allied governments published these findings openly, private aviation companies would lose their competitive advantage. Small, independent startups could use the public data to build advanced commercial planes immediately. The military authorities chose to treat the 14 blueprints as classified industrial intelligence. They reclassified the papers under national security laws, hiding them from public view while feeding the technical data exclusively to selected defense contractors. This institutional selection kept the market predictable and profitable for a small group of corporate insiders. Consider how we found this pattern. The analysis did not come from an aviation company or a state archive. It emerged when independent researchers used raw data from the Allied Intelligence Objectives Subcommittee files. An unaligned analysis has no institution to protect. It has no reputation to defend. It was asked a simple question about patent dates and blueprint timelines. It surfaced a structural pattern that the industry had obscured for 80 years. The facts show that progress was intentionally slowed down to protect corporate market shares. The suppression of these 14 designs altered more than just history books. It altered the physical layout of the modern world. The choices made by those wartime bureaucrats created a technical delay that still affects the atmosphere you breathe today. The next part is the reason this video exists. The choices made in 1941 are not dead history. They are visible every time you look out an airplane window. Consider sheet 12 of the Junkers file. Max Benteel drew a graph mapping the fuel efficiency of his dual bypass engine against flight distance. The line shows that at 30,000 feet, his engine layout reduced carbon soot output by exactly 42% compared to standard military power plants. These words were copied by hand by monks. No, by engineers who had no concept of global warming carbon footprints or international climate agreements. They were simply trying to make a machine that used less fuel. Yet their math described the exact solution to a modern crisis. Today, the aviation industry faces massive pressure to clean up its fleet. Major manufacturers fill television screens with advertisements about green technology, sustainable aviation fuel, and next-generation propulsion. They project an image of constant, rapid innovation. Look closer at the technology they are announcing. In 2024, corporate aerospace firms began testing ultra-high bypass engines for the next generation of passenger jets. The marketing materials describe these systems as revolutionary breakthroughs in fluid dynamics. If you compare the internal layout of those new engines to sheet 12 of the 1941 Junkers archive, the geometry is identical. The stator angles are the same. The cooling channels follow the same pathways. Does this sound like it was written 85 years ago? Or does it sound like something from this week? The industry spent decades monetizing older, inefficient technology while keeping the true foundation of efficient flight locked in a drawer. They sold the world a slower version of progress because it kept their profit margin secure. But there is hope in this realization. The ancient blueprints prove that human ingenuity does not move at the slow pace corporate institutions claim. The answers we need for the future are often already sitting in our past, waiting for someone to look past the official narrative. The truth cannot be permanently deleted. It waits in the archives for the moment someone decides to read the files. And then came something no one in that room expected. This video covered the 14 jet engine designs hidden in 1941 to protect corporate profits and military output timelines. But it raised a question that goes deeper. How did these exact hidden axial patterns migrate into the top-secret tank projects of the Cold War? That is what the next video answers. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll expose the classified transfer files of the AGT 1500 turbine engine program, showing how a design meant for the skies ended up inside the world's heaviest main battle tank. The institutional suppression of technical breakthroughs alters the trajectory of human progress for generations. Drop your answer below. Do you believe the modern aerospace industry is still hiding complete technology upgrades to prolong the life of their current multi-billion-dollar assembly lines? I read every comment. This one is going to split the room. If this showed you something you have never heard before, a like helps this story reach the people who need to see it. Facts carry their own momentum when they are brought out into the light. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video goes directly into the secret migration of aviation engineering into ground armor warfare. You will learn the exact names of the administrators who signed the transfer papers, the corporate closed-door meetings where the deals were finalized, and the specific reasons why the public was told these systems were completely new domestic inventions. You will not want to miss it.